The committee room froze. Cameras zoomed in. Then Jasmine Crockett dropped the sentence that would light up every screen in America. "Kash Patel," she declared, her voice slicing through the stale air like a razor, "is the least qualified candidate for FBI director in the history of this nation." For a breathless second, the room stood suspended. Reporters leaned forward as if gravity itself had shifted. Staffers exchanged wide-eyed glances, their pens hovering mid-note. Across the polished wood of the witness table, Patel blinked, his practiced smile faltering just enough for the cameras to catch it. A dozen lenses tightened their focus, capturing the exact moment a carefully constructed facade began to crack. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. Crockett's words carried the precision of a seasoned litigator and the electricity of a lightning strike. The sentence was short, sharp, and devastating, a verdict delivered before the trial had even begun. Viewers watching live felt the jolt in real time, a surge of adrenaline that needed no translation. It wasn't merely an insult. It was a public reckoning, the kind of statement destined to echo far beyond the marble walls of the Capitol. Patel shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening as the echo of Crockett's declaration settled over the chamber. The microphones picked up every breath, every scrape of paper, every heartbeat of silence. This was more than political theater, it was a collision between ambition and accountability, and no one in the room could pretend otherwise. Outside, social media flared to life. Clips of the remark shot across timelines before Patel could even compose his next sentence. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Commentators scrambled to frame the moment while millions replayed the clip, dissecting every flicker of reaction on Patel's face. But this wasn't just an insult. It was a surgical strike, years in the making, sharpened by months of hearings, whispered briefings, and a lifetime of battles against power abused. Crockett had not come to trade polite jabs, she had come to expose, to warn, to draw a line so bright that no spin could blur it. And as the stunned committee struggled to recover, the question loomed larger than ever: what history had prepared her for this fearless assault? The air inside the hearing chamber felt charged, as if the walls themselves understood that history was about to pivot. Lawmakers shifted in their leather chairs, papers rustling in a nervous rhythm that betrayed their carefully composed faces. Reporters perched like hawks along the back row, their cameras and recorders angled toward the witness table, every lens hungry for the next explosive soundbite. Even the overhead lights seemed to hum with anticipation, casting a sterile glow that made every bead of sweat shimmer like a confession. This was not an ordinary confirmation hearing. Kash Patel, a man whose resume read more like a political chessboard than a law enforcement manual, sat squarely at the center of the storm. The very idea of Patel becoming FBI director had once sounded like a fringe fantasy whispered in back rooms and private text chains. Yet here he was, flanked by allies who had spent months maneuvering him into the spotlight, turning whispered ambitions into a tangible, terrifying possibility. Patel's supporters, a coalition of power brokers and partisan loyalists, framed his rise as a victory for outsiders. A break from what they painted as an entrenched bureaucratic elite. They spoke of draining the swamp, of shaking up an agency they claimed had grown too independent. But behind the slogans lay a deeper calculation. Patel's loyalty to their faction was ironclad, his willingness to bend long-standing norms almost legendary. For those craving unchecked influence over federal investigations, Patel wasn't just a candidate, he was a dream come true. Across the aisle, concern hardened into quiet alarm. Veteran lawmakers whispered about the stakes in tones usually reserved for national security briefings. The FBI is not merely another agency, it is the nation's most powerful investigative force, armed with tools capable of uncovering corruption or concealing it. The director controls priorities, sets the culture, and decides which threats demand action. If Patel actually gets the job, the nation's most powerful law enforcement agency could change forever, its independence warped, its mission twisted to serve political ends rather than the public good. Journalists sensed the gravity and sharpened their questions accordingly. They knew the cameras were capturing not just a hearing, but a test of democratic resilience. Could a partisan strategist with scant law enforcement experience be entrusted with the agency that guards elections, investigates presidents, and polices the nation's most sensitive secrets? Every shuffle of paper, every clearing of a throat seemed to underscore the stakes. Patel smiled with calculated calm, offering practiced lines about reform and transparency, but his critics heard a different subtext: control, retaliation, and the slow erosion of checks and balances. Outside the chamber, crowds gathered beneath a gray Washington sky. Some carried signs demanding an end to what they called political hostage-taking. Others chanted slogans celebrating Patel as a disruptor, a wrecking ball aimed at the so-called deep state. The clash of voices seeped into the marble corridors, a reminder that this fight extended far beyond the polished hearing room. Inside, the tension reached a quiet crescendo. Everyone waited for the next exchange, the question sharp enough to pierce Patel's polished veneer, the answer reckless enough to ignite headlines. They knew the fireworks were coming, the only mystery was when and how. And as Jasmine Crockett adjusted the microphone in front of her, the chamber seemed to lean forward as one, bracing for the confrontation that would test not just Patel's composure, but the very boundaries of American democracy. To understand the weight of Jasmine Crockett's charge, one must first trace the unlikely ascent of the man seated across from her. Kash Patel's resume gleams at a glance: national security aide, congressional investigator, White House advisor, defense official. Each title suggests experience, gravitas, the kind of credential journey one might expect of a future FBI director. Yet beneath the polished surface lies a record defined less by steady service than by relentless political maneuvering, a career built on loyalty to power rather than the impartial pursuit of justice. Patel first emerged from the shadows as a staff attorney on Capitol Hill, where his sharp legal instincts and appetite for partisan combat caught the eye of rising political operatives. Behind closed doors, staffers whispered about his willingness to push boundaries others hesitated to cross. He earned a reputation for digging up explosive narratives during high-stakes investigations, a skill that endeared him to party leaders eager for headlines but raised quiet alarms among career professionals who valued process over spectacle. His next leap came as an investigator during the contentious Russia probe. Patel's role in drafting memos challenging the credibility of federal intelligence agencies won him praise from allies who saw the investigation as a witch hunt and criticism from intelligence veterans who warned he was undermining the very institutions charged with protecting the country. Former officials recall late-night strategy sessions where Patel, ever confident, sketched plans to discredit career analysts whose only crime was following the evidence. He seemed less interested in the truth than in a political win, one former staffer told reporters, requesting anonymity to avoid reprisal. The pattern continued when Patel moved into the executive branch. At the National Security Council and later the Pentagon, he became a trusted lieutenant to figures intent on reshaping policy to fit political goals. Insiders recount moments of chaos, classified briefings abruptly cancelled, urgent recommendations delayed until they could be spun for partisan advantage. It always felt like the mission was loyalty, not national security, said a former defense official who worked alongside him. Many scandals dotted his tenure like warning lights on a dashboard. Reports surfaced of Patel pressuring career officers to release sensitive intelligence that could embarrass political opponents. Watchdogs questioned his involvement in abrupt personnel moves that sidelined seasoned professionals. Each episode ended with Patel denying wrongdoing and emerging more entrenched, as if controversy were not a hazard but a ladder. Yet for all the titles and headlines, Patel's direct law enforcement experience remains strikingly thin. He has never led a major investigative agency, never overseen the delicate balance of federal policing and civil liberties, never managed the sprawling infrastructure that keeps the FBI neutral in the face of political storms. Critics note that his legal background, while real, leans heavily on partisan oversight rather than criminal investigation. It's like asking a campaign strategist to run a nuclear power plant, quipped one former Justice Department official. Supporters counter that his outsider status is precisely the point. They celebrate his willingness to challenge what they call an entrenched deep state, arguing that disruption is the cure for bureaucratic decay. Patel himself has embraced the image of a fearless reformer, promising to clean house and restore accountability if given the Bureau's top job. But even some allies admit privately that reform is a vague word, easily stretched to mean retaliation, purge, or political takeover. As cameras flashed during the hearing, Patel projected calm confidence, his tailored suit and measured cadence masking the turbulence of his career. But those who had watched his rise knew better. Behind the practiced smile stood a man who had climbed not through quiet service but through a series of high-risk gambits, each one tying him more tightly to a single political faction. The question hanging over the chamber was not simply whether Patel could run the FBI, but whether he would wield its vast powers as an independent guardian of the law, or as a weapon for those who placed him there. The stakes could not be clearer. An agency entrusted with safeguarding elections, rooting out corruption, and protecting civil liberties might soon be led by a strategist whose greatest skill has been bending institutions to partisan will. It was this tension between Patel's glittering resume and his troubling record that gave Jasmine Crockett's words their devastating precision. Her charge of least qualified in history was more than a rhetorical jab, it was a distillation of years of whispered concerns and public warnings. Yet as Patel adjusted his tie and met Crockett's gaze, he seemed unfazed, almost daring his critics to challenge him. The room felt the weight of unfinished stories, of battles still to be revealed. Because Patel wasn't the only one with a story. Long before the bright lights of Capitol Hill captured her silhouette, Jasmine Crockett learned the language of struggle in the streets and classrooms of her hometown. She was raised in a community where opportunity rarely knocked, where neighbors leaned on one another when doors slammed shut from the outside. Her parents taught her that dignity was not given by titles or wealth but earned through service, and that even a single voice clear, insistent, and unafraid could force the world to listen. Those lessons would become the compass that guided every choice she made, even when the path ahead was jagged and steep. Crockett's early years were marked by the dual pressures of expectation and exclusion. Teachers recognized her quick mind and relentless drive, but she also felt the quiet sting of racial bias, the counselor who suggested more realistic career goals, the teacher who raised an eyebrow when she announced she wanted to study law. Instead of dimming her ambition, those moments ignited it. Each slight became fuel, each dismissal a silent dare to prove them wrong. She carried that fire to college and then to law school, where she earned a reputation for being both brilliant and unyielding. While some classmates chased corporate internships, Crockett gravitated toward public defense, drawn to the raw front line of justice where lives were measured not in billable hours but in second chances. She spent long nights in cramped offices preparing cases for clients who could barely afford a bus ticket, much less a lawyer. The work was grueling and often heartbreaking, but it clarified her purpose. While others sought power, Crockett sought justice, a mentor would later remark, summing up a career defined by service over status. Her legal battles exposed her to the machinery of inequality, cash bail systems that punished poverty, prosecutors who wielded discretion like a weapon, laws written to protect the privileged. Crockett did more than argue cases, she fought to change the conditions that produced them, pressing for reforms in sentencing, policing, and access to counsel. In community meetings, she listened more than she spoke, learning the names and stories behind the statistics. In court, she wielded words like finely honed tools, dismantling flawed arguments with a calm precision that left opponents scrambling. Judges noted her professionalism, juries felt her conviction. But courtroom victories were not enough. Crockett understood that true justice required changing the laws themselves, and that meant stepping into the bruising arena of politics. Her first campaign for state office was an uphill climb against better-funded opponents and entrenched power brokers who dismissed her as too young, too outspoken, too unwilling to play by insider rules. Volunteers knocked on doors until their knuckles ached. Crockett walked block after block, introducing herself to voters who had never seen a candidate fight so hard for their attention, much less their trust. The obstacles were relentless: anonymous attack ads, thinly veiled racism in local coverage, whispered doubts about whether a black woman could win in a district long dominated by old guard politics. Each setback might have broken a lesser candidate. Instead, Crockett met every smear with steadiness and facts, her calm dismantling of falsehoods becoming a signature style. She didn't trade insults, she delivered evidence. She didn't shout, she reasoned with a quiet force that made her opponents look small by comparison. When election night finally delivered a hard-fought victory, supporters wept not only for the win but for the way she had achieved it without surrendering her dignity or her principles. Her rise to Congress followed the same pattern: relentless outreach, fearless advocacy, and a refusal to dilute her convictions. On the Hill, she quickly established herself as a champion for voting rights, criminal justice reform, and immigrant protections. Colleagues learned to expect meticulous preparation and unflinching questioning from the freshman representative who spoke with the authority of someone who had seen injustice up close. She asks the questions others are too careful to raise, one senior lawmaker admitted, half admiring, half wary. Crockett's debate style became legendary in committee hearings. She listened with a stillness that unnerved witnesses, letting silence stretch until answers arrived on her terms. When she finally spoke, her words landed like carefully aimed arrows, never rushed, never wasted, always piercing the weakest point of an opponent's argument. Viewers noticed the way her eyes locked on a witness, how she tilted her head slightly before delivering a question that left them fumbling for words. It was not aggression, it was mastery, a lawyer's mind applying pressure until the truth surfaced. Those who know her best say the secret to her power lies in empathy. Behind every sharp inquiry is a memory of the clients she defended, the neighbors she served, the children she still mentors when cameras aren't around. Her ambition is personal but never selfish, fueled by the belief that government should be a shield for the vulnerable, not a sword for the powerful. Supporters see in her a reflection of their own struggles, a daughter of working people who refuse to be defined by circumstance, a black woman navigating institutions built to exclude her, an advocate who carries the stories of the overlooked into rooms where decisions are made. It was this history, etched into every word she spoke, that electrified the committee room on the day she faced Kash Patel. Crockett arrived not merely as a politician, but as the embodiment of every barrier she had broken and every voice she carried with her. Her calm composure was not the absence of passion but the discipline of someone who knows the stakes and refuses to be rattled. And as she leaned toward the microphone, ready to confront a man whose career thrived on chaos, the question was no longer whether she belonged in that room. It was how far her quiet force could shake the halls of power next. The hum of the overhead lights became a low, restless buzz as the next round of questioning began. Reporters adjusted their cameras, lenses clicking like tiny metronomes marking the tension in the room. Jasmine Crockett straightened her notes with deliberate care, the faint scrape of paper loud against the sudden hush. Across the witness table, Kash Patel leaned back slightly, eyes scanning the dais with the smooth confidence of a man who had weathered countless political storms. "Mr. Patel," Crockett began, her voice measured but unmistakably firm, "your advocates describe you as a reformer. Yet your resume shows no experience managing a federal law enforcement agency. Can you name a single investigation you have personally overseen?" Patel offered a courteous smile, the kind that promised politeness but concealed 1,000 deflections. "Congresswoman," he replied, "leadership is not about titles. It's about vision, about understanding the broader picture of national security and ensuring the FBI remains accountable to the people." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Crockett did not flinch. She leaned slightly forward, her eyes narrowing with patient precision. "Vision is admirable," she said evenly, "but investigations require more than vision. They require expertise. Have you ever supervised a criminal probe, yes or no?" Patel shifted in his seat, smoothing the lapel of his suit as if the fabric might absorb the pressure. "I've worked closely with law enforcement professionals," he answered, sidestepping the question with a practiced elegance. "I understand the challenges they face." The room tightened. A reporter's camera flashed, the strobe bouncing off the polished wood of the committee table. Crockett's gaze remained steady. "Worked closely," she repeated, letting the phrase hang in the air until the silence became a question of its own. Patel cleared his throat. "Congresswoman, I believe fresh perspectives are exactly what the FBI needs right now. My career has been about challenging entrenched systems and bringing accountability where it's long overdue. From the back of the chamber came the faint scrape of a chair, a restless reminder of the audience's anticipation. Crockett glanced briefly at her notes, then back to Patel. Her voice softened, carrying an edge sharper than any shout. Accountability, she said, is meaningless without qualification. Would you entrust national security to someone who's never handled evidence, never managed agents, never balanced civil liberties against federal power? Patel opened his mouth, but Crockett pressed on, her timing surgical. Because that is what you are asking the American people to do. The gallery erupted in whispers. Staffers exchanged uneasy glances. A journalist mouthed an incredulous wow to a colleague. Patel's smile tightened, the corners of his lips straining under the weight of the exchange. He attempted another pivot, speaking of outsider energy and restoring public trust, but the words felt thin, stretched across a chasm of unanswered questions. Crockett tilted her head, listening with the stillness that had unnerved so many witnesses before him. Every pause in Patel's response seemed to grow heavier, every vague phrase another stone added to the scale of doubt. She allowed the silence to linger just long enough for viewers to feel it, then cut through with a final, unyielding probe. Mr. Patel, she said, each syllable crisp as glass, the FBI director is entrusted with the most sensitive investigations in the nation. Without direct experience, how can the American people believe you will defend justice rather than bend it? Patel inhaled sharply, but no ready answer came. The cameras caught the flicker in his eyes, the subtle tightening of his jaw. Somewhere in the press section, a pen rolled off a notebook and clattered to the floor, its echo startling in the stillness. Crockett's expression remained calm, almost serene, as if she already knew the verdict forming in the minds of those watching. The tension coiled tighter, a silent countdown to the words that would define the hearing. And then, Crockett leaned forward. The pause before Jasmine Crockett's next words stretched like a wire pulled to breaking. Cameras zoomed closer, their lenses hungry for the instant when silence would snap into sound. Patel shifted in his seat, fingers grazing the edge of his notepad as though a few scribbled lines could rescue him from the tightening spotlight. Every movement, the twitch of his jaw, the slight lift of his eyebrows betrayed a flicker of unease he could no longer hide. Then Crockett spoke, her voice low but ringing with unmistakable clarity. Mr. Patel, she said, each word deliberate, I have listened carefully to your answers. I have asked for evidence of leadership in federal law enforcement. I have asked for proof of investigative experience. And you have provided none. So I will say this plainly, for the record and for the American people, Kash Patel is the least qualified FBI director in the history of this nation. The room detonated in sound. Gasps rose from the gallery, sharp as shattered glass. A reporter in the second row let out a whispered "Oh my God," barely caught by the microphones. Staffers on the majority side shifted in their seats, some biting back involuntary smiles, others exchanging wide-eyed glances that needed no words. A few aides covered their mouths with their hands, as though holding in the shock would keep the hearing from spinning off its axis. Patel froze. For a heartbeat, he seemed to search the table for a script that wasn't there. His practiced half-smile faltered, the corners of his mouth twitching in a futile attempt to reassemble composure. He cleared his throat once, twice, each cough echoing louder than any shout. "Congresswoman," he began, voice catching on the first syllable, "with all due respect, I—" Crockett didn't flinch. She leaned slightly closer to the microphone, her posture a quiet assertion of control. "Respect," she interrupted softly, "is earned by competence and integrity. The FBI demands both." A wave of murmurs washed across the chamber. The press corps, already hammering at their keyboards, sensed the headline crystallizing before them. Phones buzzed as aides texted frantic updates to colleagues outside. The phrase "least qualified FBI director in history" flashed across social feeds within seconds, hashtags multiplying like sparks from dry tinder. Hashtag least qualified rocketed to the top of trending topics before Patel could finish his next sentence. Patel tried again, his voice straining for steadiness. "Congresswoman, I bring a unique perspective. My work in national security." "Perspective," Crockett cut in, "does not substitute for experience. This position is not a training ground for partisan strategists. It is the nation's front-line defense against crime and corruption. You have shown neither the record nor the restraint required for that responsibility." The audience gasped again, a collective intake of breath that seemed to draw the oxygen from the room. Even some members of Patel's own party lowered their eyes, unwilling to meet the cameras in the wake of such a direct, surgical strike. Patel's composure slipped another inch. He shifted in his chair, fingers drumming a nervous rhythm against the polished wood. His eyes darted toward his allies on the committee dais, searching for a lifeline that wasn't coming. A sheen of sweat glistened at his temple, catching the overhead lights like a signal flare. Crockett pressed on, her tone steady but unyielding. "This nation's justice system cannot be entrusted to ambition alone. The American people deserve a director who understands the delicate balance between federal power and civil liberties, someone who has navigated investigations, managed agents, and upheld the rule of law without fear or favor. You, Mr. Patel, have demonstrated none of these qualifications. And the danger of placing such power in untested hands cannot be overstated." The silence that followed was electric. It wasn't the emptiness of a lull, it was the charged stillness of recognition, the collective awareness that a truth long whispered had just been spoken aloud. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every word before it could be softened by spin. Staffers from both parties leaned toward one another, whispering fragments of disbelief. "She actually said it. Did you hear her?" Patel inhaled sharply, gathering himself for a counter-punch. "Congresswoman, I reject the premise of your statement," he said, his voice rising half a notch. "I have served this country at the highest levels. My experience in intelligence." But the momentum had already shifted. Crockett's calm rebuttals had drawn the oxygen from Patel's defense, leaving his words to stumble across a room that was no longer listening. Even as he spoke, phones buzzed with breaking news alerts. Crockett to Patel, least qualified in history. Cable producers in distant studios barked orders to cut into programming. Commentators rushed to secure panelists for instant reaction. Inside the chamber, the social validation was immediate and unmistakable. A junior staffer on the minority side bit the inside of her cheek to suppress a grin. A seasoned journalist mouthed "historic" to a colleague. Behind the witness table, an aide to another member shifted his notepad to hide the doodle of a triumphant exclamation mark he had scrawled in the margin. Patel attempted one final pivot, speaking of outsider energy and public accountability, but the words sounded hollow against the ringing clarity of Crockett's charge. The contrast was complete, her poise against his fluster, her precision against his vagueness, her quiet authority against his faltering bravado. Crockett, sensing the moment's gravity, allowed the silence to stretch once more. Her eyes held Patel's with unblinking steadiness. "The FBI is not a trophy for political loyalty," she said, her voice carrying to the farthest corners of the chamber. "It is a safeguard for every American citizen. We will not gamble with its integrity." The final syllable hung in the air like a gavel's strike. For a long beat, no one moved. Then the chamber erupted not in chaos, but in a low, rolling murmur of recognition that something irreversible had just occurred. Patel sat back, his face a careful mask, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed the impact. He offered a tight nod, as if to acknowledge the blow while pretending it had not landed. Cameras captured every micro-expression, every flicker of discomfort, feeding a public hungry for confirmation of what they already suspected. Outside the room, the world reacted in real time. Hashtags surged, memes sprouted, and late-night producers clipped the exchange for prime-time monologues. Viewers across the country replayed the moment again and again, savoring the calm ferocity with which Crockett had dismantled a man once touted as untouchable. But the shockwaves didn't stop at Capitol Hill. The hearing had barely adjourned when the internet exploded. Within minutes, the phrase "least qualified FBI director in history" had ricocheted across every corner of social media. On X, the hashtag surged past 1 million mentions in less than an hour, fueled by a parallel wave of posts that lit up timelines from DC to Dubai. Clips of Jasmine Crockett's takedown played on loop, each replay sharpening the force of her words and feeding the growing sense that a new political icon had just emerged in real time. Phones buzzed with push alerts. "Crockett levels Patel," blared one headline. "A congressional mic drop for the ages," declared another. Meme makers worked at lightning speed, pairing Patel's startled expression with captions like "when you realize the homework is due and you didn't even know there was homework." One viral post showed a GIF of a meteor crashing into Earth with the text, "Impact, me hearing Crockett call Patel the least qualified in history." Twitter threads dissected the exchange frame by frame. "Notice the micro-expression at 0:06, one user wrote, highlighting the exact second Patel's composure slipped. Influencers with millions of followers weighed in. A progressive activist tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett just gave every woman of color in politics a master class in fearless truth-telling. Hashtag Crockett mic drop." Another added, "This isn't just a soundbite. This is history being made live on C-SPAN." On TikTok, creators remixed the moment into everything from dance challenges to dramatic reenactments. One video, set to a pounding bass drop, cut between Crockett's piercing line and Patel's stunned reaction, racking up 2 million likes in a single afternoon. Instagram stories flooded with screenshots of the quote, bold white text over black backgrounds, the digital equivalent of a rallying cry. Cable news anchors scrambled to keep pace. By evening, every major network led with the clip, replaying Crockett's words with breathless commentary. It's rare to witness a congressional moment that instantly defines a nominee, one analyst marveled on live television. Late-night hosts followed suit, weaving Crockett's takedown into their monologues. "I haven't seen someone get roasted that hard since my Thanksgiving turkey," joked one comedian to raucous applause. Another quipped, "Somewhere tonight, a thesaurus is looking for a new word for unqualified." Behind the scenes, political insiders moved with frantic urgency. Patel's allies huddled in back rooms, drafting talking points to blunt the blow. Anonymous sources floated trial balloons to sympathetic reporters. This was all theatrics, they insisted. But the spin struggled to gain traction against the raw, replayable power of Crockett's words. The clip needed no interpretation. It was self-explanatory and devastating. Even some conservative commentators admitted the damage. A right-leaning columnist wrote, "Patel looked unprepared, and Crockett seized the moment with surgical precision." Republican strategists privately fretted that the nomination might be dead on arrival if public opinion continued to harden. One veteran operative confessed to a reporter, "The optics are brutal. It's not just that she landed a punch, it's that everyone in America saw it land." Progressive circles, meanwhile, erupted in celebration. Activist groups blasted fundraising emails with subject lines like "Mic drop heard around the world" and "Stand with Jasmine." Local chapters organized watch parties for replay broadcasts, turning the moment into a communal event. College students projected the clip onto campus buildings. At a neighborhood bar in Dallas, Crockett's home turf, patrons broke into cheers each time the line played on the overhead TV. The excitement carried a deeper charge. For supporters who had long yearned for politicians willing to confront power directly, Crockett's takedown felt like more than a viral moment, it felt like vindication. "She said what we've all been thinking," one young organizer told a live stream audience. "She didn't just speak truth to power. She spoke for us." By nightfall, Crockett's social media following had ballooned, her name trending alongside global headlines. Commentators began speculating about her political future. Was this the speech that would catapult her into national leadership? Could this hearing become the launchpad for a larger movement? In Washington, the shockwaves rattled through the halls of power. Senators fielded urgent calls from donors. Lobbyists whispered about recalculating their bets. Patel's nomination, once a foregone conclusion in certain circles, now looked precarious at best. As one senior staffer put it, "There's before Crockett's mic drop, and there's after. We're all living in the after now." Outside the Beltway, ordinary citizens joined the chorus. From suburban kitchens to late-night subway rides, conversations echoed the same refrain, "Did you see it? Did you hear what she said?" The moment belonged not just to Crockett but to the millions who felt their own frustration sharpened into a single, unforgettable sentence. And as the clip continued to spread, it became clear that this was no passing trend. The mic drop was still reverberating, carrying its charge of excitement and belonging into every corner of a country suddenly wide awake. As the echoes of the hearing faded, Jasmine Crockett stepped back from the microphone, her posture calm, her expression unwavering. The room was still buzzing with whispers and murmurs, but in that moment, she transformed the raw spectacle into something far more profound. Her words were no longer just a political strike, they were a lesson in principle, a reminder of the deeper responsibilities that accompany power. "Let me be clear," she began, her voice steady and measured, "this is not about one person. This is about the integrity of our institutions and the trust the American people place in them." Every eye in the chamber turned toward her, journalists leaning in, lawmakers silent. Crockett reframed the confrontation, taking a moment that had thrilled and shocked and shaping it into a call for vigilance. It was a reminder that the stakes were never merely partisan, but foundational. She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle over the room. Qualifications matter. Power demands accountability. The tools of justice cannot be entrusted to ambition alone. They must be wielded with wisdom, experience, and a commitment to the truth that transcends personal or political gain. Her gaze swept the chamber slowly, connecting with the young staffers, the reporters, the citizens watching from afar through screens and feeds. Every syllable was a bridge, carrying the audience from outrage to understanding, from spectacle to responsibility. Crockett spoke of dignity both personal and institutional. She reminded the room that true leadership is measured not by the volume of one's claims, nor by the swiftness of one's victories, but by the restraint, patience, and humility required to wield authority justly. "Ego has no place where decisions shape lives," she said. "And ambition, untempered by service, can become the very threat we fight to prevent." Her words drew the drama of the hearing into a broader moral frame. She highlighted the role of civic duty, the importance of watching, questioning, and holding those in power accountable. Crockett invited her listeners to see themselves in the narrative not as passive spectators, but as participants in a living democracy. Her message was simple, yet profound: the defense of justice is not only the responsibility of officials but of every citizen who values fairness, equality, and the rule of law. Crockett's crescendo was not loud or theatrical, it was quiet, resolute, and inspiring. "We rise not by tearing each other down, but by lifting standards, by insisting that competence and integrity are the minimum we demand. We serve a nation, not our own ambitions. We uphold institutions, not personal agendas. This is how we honor the legacy of those who fought for equality, justice, and opportunity before us." The chamber seemed to hold its breath, absorbing her message. Journalists scribbled, recording more than just the exchange. They were documenting a lesson in courage and principle. Staffers nodded quietly, sensing that what they had witnessed was a rare convergence of intellect, preparation, and moral clarity. Outside, viewers felt the resonance too. Tweets and posts shifted tone, from outrage at Patel's qualifications to admiration for Crockett's clarity and foresight. Social media became less a platform for spectacle and more a forum for reflection. Her final point tied the dramatic confrontation to universal values. Every decision matters. Every voice matters. And every action sets a precedent for the generations that follow. We must choose leaders who honor that trust, who understand the weight of responsibility, and who carry it with integrity. Because when we do, dignity triumphs over ego. Service outweighs ambition. And justice, true justice, prevails. In that moment, the hearing, the viral clip, and the public outcry were no longer merely political fodder. They became a teaching moment, a touchstone for civic pride and hope. Crockett's words offered more than satisfaction, they offered a vision of what governance could be when principles guide action. The story of the mic drop was not simply about one sharp critique, it was about the reaffirmation of values that underpin the nation: fairness, accountability, and courage in the face of unchecked power. And as the cameras finally shifted away, as the reporters filed out and the chamber emptied, her message lingered. It was a reminder to every citizen watching: the fight for justice is ongoing, and each of us has a role to play. The nation had witnessed not just a confrontation, but the embodiment of leadership grounded in service, integrity, and unwavering moral clarity. The words echoed across the chamber, across the nation, and across every screen that carried the moment live: Kash Patel is the least qualified FBI director in the history of this nation. What began as a sharp rebuke in a congressional hearing became a statement of principle, a viral declaration that reminded Americans everywhere that competence, integrity, and accountability must always come before loyalty, ambition, or political expediency. But this is not just a story to watch, it is a story to act upon. Every voice matters. Every share, every comment, every conversation can help reinforce the standards we demand from those in power. If you believe qualifications should outweigh loyalty, if you believe that leadership requires more than ambition, then share this video. Let this message travel beyond these walls, beyond the screens, and into the halls where decisions are made. Join the conversation. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories that hold power to account, stories that celebrate courage and truth. Engage with your community, discuss what it means to demand integrity in leadership, and remember that vigilance is not passive, it is active, it is essential, it is patriotic. And finally, carry this with you: when one person stands calm, prepared, and unwavering in the face of power, it sets a precedent for all of us. Every voice amplified, every injustice challenged, every principle defended strengthens the foundation of a democracy. Because when truth speaks boldly, history listens.